Welcome back to part 3 of this week's YAWA. See what I did there? I just jumped right in and got my intro in because you got to do the last 2.
Perfect.
If this is your first time to the channel, make sure to hit that subscribe button, give us a thumbs up, and put a question in the comments below.
Why? Why would you put a question in the comments below, Kat?
Because that, my friends, is where we're getting all of your great questions from. We're getting them from our YAWA videos, questions, and any other videos that you want to throw a YAWA question on there. Just type YAWA question and put your question there, and then I'll go through them, find them, and ask them next week.
Yeah.
So, getting started, and I really wanted to ask this one. James Riley.
Hi, James.
YAWA question. G'day. I live in Australia. I probably had a terrible accent there, but I think Australian accents are very cool. Ethan actually has an Australian accent set up for his Google Maps GPS direction giver.
Siri. I turned my Siri on my Apple phone into a Australian man. And I have to say, when we were driving down the road the other day, it was pulling into the parking lot of a hotel.
When we went to go get pigeons.
Yes, my new racing pigeons.
This is something so cool. They're like little pets.
They are.
You can feed them out of your hand and pet them. They are so adorable.
You just pick them up, hold them. They love on you, all the things. I don't know about really love, but they let you hold them and they eat.
And I love them.
So we're going to pick up these pigeons, and I hear man Siri say, turn right into the car park. And I was like, what did he just say? Turn right into the car park. So I have to ask, if you are Australian, you may or may not know this. Well, you should know this if you're Australian. Is a parking lot, which we would refer to as a parking lot. You park your vehicle in front of a business. Is it referred to as a car park in Australia? Or is man Siri, the Australian man Siri, drunk or something?
Okay. Anyway, to actually get to your question, James, I am currently training my 6-month-old GSP pup for quail, deer, and duck hunting.
Sounds like a perfect dog to do it.
With this comes the certainty of coming across snakes on a good percentage of hunts, and currently coming into the warmer part of the year, this will be a concern for me. I know at this stage, my pup will be extremely interested in snakes, so I would like to do some avoidance training with her. How do you guys go about this with your dogs? Cheers.
Cheers. I love it. So to start off with, I want to say if you are, which it sounds like you're saying you're going to run into snakes. But if you guys are listening, watching, and you don't run into a lot of snakes, I'm talking very infrequently.
Once in a blue moon, you might run into a snake.
I would not recommend doing snake avoidance training. Now, it's a recommendation. We wouldn't want you to introduce the dog to the snake, especially with the dogs like we have. You know, we have prey-driven hunting dogs and versatile dogs for that matter. So they have a little bit of sharpness to them in extent. And what I mean by that is, for example, Muddy. She got into a porcupine a couple years back, and we did a video on that, and we posted it on our YouTube channel, and we were talking about recently, we're trying to get to 1 million views on our first video, and ta-da!
We did it.
We did it. And as soon as it hit 1 million views, now it's at like 1,030,000. So it jumped almost immediately a ton. So it's very cool. Thanks everybody who's watched that video. If you haven't seen that video, check it out. It's pretty cool. And we actually show how to pull all the porcupine quills out of Muddy's mouth on the tailgate because it happened in the field a long way from a veterinarian. And it was better to be able to work through that. And you may run into it. Now, people commented in that specific video, I bet that learns her. She won't ever mess with a porcupine again. And I think the exact opposite will be the case. You know, essentially that porcupine probably just pissed her off. And she will, I would assume, tangle with the next if the opportunity arises.
Well, I know Nix does it with skunks.
Yeah, that can't be enjoyable to get sprayed in the eyeballs by a skunk, you know. And
I wouldn't think so, but...
I mean, he rolls around on the ground and tries to vomit and scrape his eyeballs out.
But if there's a skunk out there, he's going to find it and kill it.
Yes, 100%. And when we had coon dogs, same concept. They would be in there to try and grab the coon once you shoot them out of the tree, whatever. They'd try and grab a coon. Well, if there's ever a situation where there's a little bit of a fight, one of the coons got a dog on the ear or something, you'd hear "Brrr," and then as soon as they got loose, it was right back in at that coon. It's like it hurt, but
gonna fight him harder this time.
All it did was piss him off, And when we first got into it, it was like, if they're going to be a good coon dog, they got to hate coons. And I kind of understand a little bit of what they meant by that.
Yeah.
So all of those things being said, the introduction on that dog that probably isn't going to see very many snakes.
We just don't need to put value on that animal, snake, critter.
Because when you're doing snake avoidance training, it is a breaking process. And like any breaking process, it's eventually going to wear off or need to be refreshed. And it's going to be different for every dog. Some dogs are, a one and done type of scenario, but that's probably the fewer and far between. Majority of dogs, it's more like an annual or a biannual thing where they're going to need that refresher of, hey, remember these snakes?
They're bad news bears.
Leave them alone.
Yeah.
So, like I said, the dogs that aren't going to see very many, don't introduce them because you may not do a refresher often enough for it to be beneficial. Now, in your situation, you're probably going to see snakes. Now, the biggest thing that we can recommend is don't try this at home, folks.
Yeah. Seek a professional's help. If you're in an area where snakes are prevalent enough to be a problem, be an issue, there's going to be people in that area that know how to do snake avoidance classes. And that's who I would reach out to.
Yeah, so to break it down, there's a couple things that they're going to be working through. One of which is sight. The next is scent. And the third is sound.
Yes.
The S's of snake avoidance training. So what we're going to be, and the sound aspect of it is probably primarily rattlesnakes. I don't know any other snakes that really make much noise that you would teach. But if there is something, throw it down there. I would love to research this.
Maybe the other S is strike.
Strike. Well,
maybe there's 4 S's.
Maybe there's a 4th S. I don't know. But in the situation, essentially in the breaking training process, we're going to throw collars on. We're going to turn them up to levels that are high to extremely uncomfortable. And we're going to bring that dog into the scent zone. As soon as they turn, acknowledge, recognize scent, that's bad. Don't go near that. And then that gets repeated until the dog recognizes scent and avoids it. That's what they're looking for. Now, it's interesting that bird avoidance can happen with improper handling, and it looks very similar to what you're trying to get results with the snake. Now, the next part of that would be sight.
Yep, so you'd come where the dog can't smell the snake, so upwind of the snake.
And they can see it. And typically that avoids a striking motion at the dog. And then bad news bears. Then the last would be sound. You pull them in again where they can't see or smell. And there goes the rattlesnake. And bad. So it's essentially just saying these things are bad. It's repeated until the dog is no longer interested in the snake.
And actually avoids the situation. So the one thing that I will recommend too, because you mentioned your dog is only 6 months old, fairly young. We have had a situation where a client came out for consult. The dog had snake avoidance training, but had not had any collar conditioning to recall or place training or anything like that.
I remember this.
And the dog, when the e-collar was on and we started trying to do some of that collar conditioning, freaked out, lost its mind, was scared to death because the last and only situation that it had ever experienced with an e-collar before was bad. So making sure that your dog has a proper collar introduction first and knows how to respond properly for recall or place training or something like that, and understands that it's not necessarily the collar that's bad, it's the snake and the result of the snake that's bad, would be really important.
And we were able to work through that, but it took a lot.
Yes, definitely. And it would be something to avoid if at all possible. See what I did there?
I like it. Awesome question. Good
question. Next question from Caroline Gorno. First off, love your guys' videos. Have watched every one.
It said YAWA question.
Okay. YAWA question.
See what she did there? Made it easy to find her question so we could answer it here.
First off, love your guys' videos. Have watched every one.
That's awesome.
Which is almost insane, actually, because there's a lot of videos.
There are a lot of videos. We need to have a finished, hashtag finished t-shirts or something like that.
Seriously. Keep up the amazing content. Well, you're welcome, and thanks for being a fan, a very dedicated fan. My question is, your opinion on puppy sizes when born. Is there really such a thing as a runt? Do you find that the size of the puppy has any effect on the dog as an adult? Thanks.
The great debate. I'm going to say right now, this is probably one of the biggest things that we hear, equal to or right up there with the sex debate, male versus female, which is better, which trains faster, which is smarter, which is all the things.
Well, because people ask, not all the time, but we do get, I would say, a fair number of questions of, hey, do you guys ever have any runts that you just are giving away?
Yeah, lots of people ask about giving away runts, and then we get a lot of people that ask about, well, I want to put down a deposit, but I only want the runt. I've always had runts, and runts are the best, and so on and so forth.
So the great debate.
So first of all, I'm going to say that from a runt zone, let's specifically talk about the size aspect of things.
Okay.
So there are times when puppies come out at the whelping time when the puppies come out.
Delivery, labor.
That's the word. They come out in some fairly drastic size differences.
They can, yeah.
We have, and I believe, and fact check me. Let's go with this one. But there could be dates that the fertilization happens, and it could be anywhere from 2 to 3 days, maybe even 4 days, depending on when the eggs exactly drop and how long the semen lasts, and when the breedings or ties happen.
And when the eggs are fertilized, when they have placental attachment, all the
things lining up. I feel like there are some chance, or a pretty good chance, for some variance to happen in there, upwards of a few days.
And when puppies are days apart, when they're young like that,
in the early stages,
that growth and stuff changes a lot in those few days. After you get to, 6 months old or older, a couple days difference, you're not even going to be able to tell. Yeah. Exactly. So in the early stages, a few days difference in development and age technically makes a big difference in size.
So to say now, as they develop, even to go all the way up to they're ready to go home, 8 weeks old, and you have this little puppy that was born smaller, maybe didn't get any additional help, which there's a lot of debating on whether you should or should not help and things like that. But maybe they didn't get any extra help and they had to work for everything. So we see a lot of things with that runt puppy where they did have to work really hard. And if they don't work hard enough, they get pushed out of the way, and then they end up in eventually wasting away to nothing if they aren't getting additional help someplace else. So that puppy can become the fighter. And that's what I think a lot of people see from a personality standpoint of, runts are the best because they're always tough and they have all this drive.
Because they had to work harder for resources.
Yeah, they learned from a very young age that they had to work for it, where the big lug, maybe doesn't have quite as much drive and desire as a little puppy because he didn't have to work for it as much.
I can kind of see what you're saying there.
But ultimately, when it comes down to it, we have seen the smaller puppies in the litter, when they go home at 8 weeks, grow into be as big, if not the biggest puppies when they're full grown. So there's a lot less to the actual size of the puppy at that time, actually meaning that it's going to be a quote unquote runt.
Yeah. And another thing that I want to throw out there, because like Ethan mentioned, sometimes the smaller puppy has to work really hard. They're maybe not getting any extra help from the breeder in a sense of supplementation, or, even not supplementation, but making sure that that puppy gets the opportunity to nurse first before all of the other puppies push them off the teat. So going to some, I wouldn't say extreme measures, but some extra measures to help that puppy thrive a little bit more. Not all breeders do. So that situation, those puppies do learn that they have to work really hard, early bird gets the worm, that sort of thing. And I think too, though, the way that we develop and raise puppies, if I do see a puppy that's struggling to gain weight at the same rate as the other puppies, is a little bit smaller, isn't one that I always see on a teat where I come down and I'm checking on the puppies, I will say, you probably need a little supplementation. And then that puppy, even though I'm still checking on all the puppies, they're all getting biosensor training, they're all getting handled, that puppy that's a little bit smaller is getting 10 times the amount of time and attention that the rest of the puppies are getting too, because you're handling them, you're holding them, you're helping them nurse, you're, checking on them every 2 to 4 hours. It definitely depends on the situation of how often and how much you're supplementing. But in those situations, that puppy's getting more, typically, physical handling by a person than the rest of the litter.
And we've seen that the people end up being the milk truck, essentially. And as soon as you touch the puppy to pet them, to handle them, to do anything, they start squirming. I'm ready to eat. Even through that point of, getting enough and catching up and it kind of stopping, it takes a little while for that to kind of wear off, that as soon as they get touched or picked up or handled, it's time to eat again. So there are a lot of different ways to look at how through development things can happen. But as far as just true size aspect of things, I really don't think that there's a whole lot of difference. So what else as far as a part of the question?
Basically, do you feel that the size of the puppy has any effect on the dog as an adult? Thanks. Now, the last part of that I want to say is if there are other underlying health issues with that runt puppy, which definitely can happen. And that's why I mentioned, sometimes helping supplement a little bit, but not going to extreme measures. Sometimes there are reasons that there are, puppies that aren't thriving. And in those situations,
these are the tough times that we have raising puppies.
Yes, it's never easy.
No.
But sometimes that happens, and there is a reason for it, that puppy ends up going on to having another health issue that isn't genetic necessarily, but more congenital in developmental stages. Something happened in vitro that the puppy didn't develop quite properly, and then they're going to have health issues later on. So all things equal and the puppy's healthy and doesn't have any other development issues, they're going to have the same chances of developing into an excellent companion, excellent hunting dog as the rest of the litter.
Yeah, there's really no difference aside from just the size.
Yes.
So really, really good question, and one that we hear a lot. I mean, a lot of people want to know or have an opinion about runts, and I don't think that they're 100% based on anything other than their one or two experiences. So it's a good thing to talk about.
Yeah. So great question. And I don't think that we have time to squeeze in another one.
Well, I do want to say, guys, if you didn't get your question answered this week, definitely hit us up on Patreon. That's where we're answering questions on the daily. It's patreon.com/Standing Stone Kennels. And my drink's gone.
Mine's just about there.
Folks, and we are out of time for this week. I'm the guy with the pink gun.
I'm Kat, the dog trainer.
And we will see you in the next video.